Hello and welcome everybody to a brand new series that I'm doing in regards to Pokemon Go's newly introduced raid battle system. Now the reason that I'm going to be doing a series on this and outlining each of the individual raid bosses is because I do see a lot of mistakes and inefficiencies that people are doing in these raid boss fights, stemming from not being able to beat the boss, to not being able to catch the boss, to complaining about wasting their raid passes, etc, etc. And I thought I would clarify some things to hopefully make your life a little bit easier and make your battles a little bit more efficient in terms of taking it down and catching the TYRANITAR. So in regards to each of the bosses, there are several things that we're going to want to look at. The first is how to catch the raid boss once you've beaten it. The second is how to properly optimize your team, or what counters you should be using, as each specific raid boss does have their own set of counters. As you can see on the right hand side of the screen, I have a screenshot taken from GamePress that outlines the best counters for TYRANITAR, and we'll break those down a little bit more in depth as to why you should be using those mons, or mons that are very close to those if you don't have access to these ones directly. And finally, we'll take a look at what is the best battle plan to go into the boss fight with, because it does depend on your party size and what Pokemon you do have access to. So first and foremost, let's talk about how to catch the raid bosses, because this seems to be a huge problem for a lot of people, not really understanding the best method to catch raid bosses. And my method will guarantee that you will not waste a single Premier Ball if done correctly. It doesn't guarantee the catch, but it will greatly increase your chances of catching a TYRANITAR. So in this particular instance, you only want to use the Golden Raspberry, in my personal opinion, and you don't want to throw your ball until you wait for the exact precise moment where you know you will absolutely guarantee to hit him on the nose. And it will take a little bit of practice, but you're going to see what I'm doing in this clip here is I'm just waiting. And what I'm waiting for is for that catch circle to basically get to the excellent size, and then I'm going to wait for him to attack right after that. And once he does that, it means that when he's finished his attack, the excellent size circle will still be there, and I'm going to actually throw the ball towards the end of his attack animation, and that locks that excellent size circle in place. So that's the first thing it does. So if you can throw it accurately, you're going to be guaranteed to have an excellent size circle to aim for. And if you're good at aiming without the circle actually being on the screen, because as you saw there, I threw the ball at the end of his attack animation before the catch circle came up on the screen, you will be guaranteed an excellent throw. And the second thing, and the reason why it's really, the most efficient way in my opinion to catch the raid bosses, is because it guarantees that you will land the Premier Ball on the TYRANITAR. And what I mean by that is basically, because you throw the Premier Ball right at the end of his attack animation, there's a short, very, very short amount of cooldown time between when the TYRANITAR finishes his attack and when he can attack again. So there's less than a second window where basically after he finishes his first attack, he can attack for maybe like 0.25 seconds, and then he's going to do another attack or jump up or do whatever and knock away your ball or dodge your ball, and you're going to waste your throw. With this method, because you threw the ball right at the end of his attack animation, before that catch circle even comes back up on the screen, it's going to guarantee that by the time your ball reaches the TYRANITAR, he's going to be done his attack, the excellent circle will be locked in place, and the ball will hopefully land inside that excellent circle, and you'll snipe an easy excellent throw without him being able to dodge it, which means that you won't be wasting any Premier Balls. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, just try to watch the video again. I do have a few clips where I do catch the TYRANITAR on the first ball with a Golden Raspberry. Just watch them over, see when I throw the ball, and try to practice it the best you can, and I guarantee you should see a massive increase in the amount of raid bosses that you're catching if you were struggling with it before. So with that out of the way, the next thing I want to talk about is the actual battle plan and what Pokemon you should be using for a TYRANITAR specific boss. So as we wrap up this final clip where we catch this TYRANITAR, we're going to take a little bit of a break from the gameplay footage and take a look at some screenshots, and then we'll go back to the gameplay footage to wrap things up and exemplify what I'm talking about. The first thing we're going to want to take a look at is on the right side of the screen. You can see that there are some supreme and good counters. Now, I for the most part agree with GamePress's assessment here, especially on the supreme counters, but I do have a bit of a qualm with the good counters, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But in order to understand why these Pokemon are good against the TYRANITAR, we're going to actually take a little step further and look at the TYRANITAR itself and why those Pokemon are good against it. So here you can see the TYRANITAR's weakness and resistance chart, and two things should immediately jump out at you. The first is the Fight 1.96, and the second is the Psychic 0.51. Now, what that basically means is TYRANITAR is going to take essentially 2 times the amount of damage, or 1.96 times the amount of damage from a fighting type attack, and it will only take 0.51 times the damage from a psychic type attack. So what does that mean? It basically means if you're using a Machamp with fighting type moves, you're going to be doing a lot of damage, basically over 2 times the normal damage of that move to the Tyranitar, because Machamp also benefits from same type attack bonus. And if you're using something like a Blissey with Zen Headbutt, which is a psychic type move, which I see a lot of people doing for some reason, it's not going to do like no damage to the Tyranitar, because Tyranitar resists psychic type moves. So there should be no reason why you should be using Blissey against a Tyranitar, to be honest. So with that being said, why is Vaporeon also listed there? Well, we're going to take a look at the base stats of both Machamp and Vaporeon in this next screen here. First, Machamp, really good attack stat, highest attacking stat for a fighting type Pokemon in the game currently. And why is that good? Again, because when you couple that with fighting type moves, Machamp is going to do 1.2 times more damage on fighting type attacks because of stab, same type attack bonus. And then you're also going to be doing double time effective damage against a Tyranitar, or 1.96 times damage against a Tyranitar with fighting type moves. So that is why Machamp is considered to be like the best counter to Tyranitar. And there's another reason why it's also good, and we'll take a look at that in just a little bit. But I want to move on to the Vaporeon first. Now, Vaporeon, as you can see here on the Pokemon base stats, it's considered a top tier Pokemon, and for good reason. You can see here that it has more defense and way more stamina than Machamp, which means that it can tank hits from a Tyranitar. It can survive and extend the longevity of your Pokemon's life much farther than using a Machamp. It doesn't have the same amount of DPS, right? It vastly suffers in the damage department compared to Machamp because of the effective bonuses and the attack stat. But Vaporeon will be able to survive longer, and you're still doing 1.4 times damage against a Tyranitar because Rock is weak to water. So, with that out of the way, what are the Pokemon's weaknesses and resistances? So, taking a look here at the Machamp, you should see right away that Machamp resists Dark and Rock. And why is that important? Because Tyranitar, one of its quick moves is Bite, which is a Dark type move, and one of its charge moves is Stone Edge, which is a Rock type move. So not only is Machamp amazing at dishing out damage to Tyranitar, if that Tyranitar has Bite and Stone Edge, it's going to take less damage from those attacks against the Machamp. So it will also extend your life of the Machamp even further, and that is why Machamp can be such a great counter to Tyranitar. Likewise, if you look at the Vaporeon, you can see that Vaporeon also resists Steel and Fire, right, being a water type Pokemon. Why is that important? Well, because Tyranitar's other quick move is Iron Tail, which is a Steel type move, and it can also learn Fire Blast as a charge type move, right? Steel and Fire type moves respectively. What does that mean? It means your life of your Vaporeon is going to survive even longer than it currently would, even with all those tanky base stats. So overall, you can see why these Pokemon are listed as supreme counters, and why you should really be using these Pokemon above all others if you have access to them in Tyranitar raid boss fights. It's going to greatly speed up the battle, and it's going to make you much more effective against a Tyranitar raid boss. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the ideal moves that you're going to want to use for these Pokemon. So starting off with the quick move, the best quick move for Machamp is Counter, and the best quick move for Vaporeon is Water Gun. Now, you can see here on the screen, the screenshot shows where you gain your type advantage over a certain type of Pokemon. So Machamp does 1.4 times damage against normal, ice, rock, dark, and steel. So Tyranitar being both a rock and dark, it's going to take double effective damage from a fighting type attack. Again, going back to what we said earlier. Vaporeon does 1.4 times damage against rock, so again, it's going to deal that extra little bit of damage against a Tyranitar, and that's why it's good. So these moves, you can see here the true DPS for Counter it's 20, and for Water Gun it's 14. Water Gun is a faster attack, it's only 0.5 seconds, whereas Counter is 0.9 seconds, so you'll be stuck in the animation for a Counter longer than you would be for a Water Gun, which does make it a little bit harder to dodge, but given the way that the raid system is, are you really going to be dodging because of all the lag and stuff? Probably not. It's better to just outright attack. And again, it's because you have that extra amount of damage with these Pokemon, you definitely just want to keep attacking, and because you take less damage, usually from the Tyranitar's attacks, you can survive even longer, which makes dodging not so necessary. Of course, if you can dodge the charge moves, you would make an attempt to do so, but it's kind of hard to do that because there's no telegraph, and the lag just absolutely makes the raid battles almost unbearable to some degree. But looking at the charge moves now, the ideal moveset for both Pokemon, in my personal opinion, is Dynamic Punch for Machamp. As you can see there, the true DPS is 48.89, and Hydro Pump for Vaporeon, which is the true DPS being 50.61. Now, Dynamic Punch is a 2-bar charge move. It does charge up quite quickly. I think about 4 counters will charge you right up to a Dynamic Punch, or 3 counters if you're taking some hits from the Tyranitar, because that also builds your charge meter. And the Hydro Pump is a 1-charge move. Aqua Tail is also good for Vaporeon, and Close Combat is also good for Machamp, but in my opinion, Hydro Pump and Dynamic Punch are the best moves to be using in this regard against the Tyranitar raid boss. They do have the highest DPS, and the true DPS there does take into consideration the stab bonus, so you can take that true DPS and then multiply it by the super effective bonuses that you get, the 1.4 damage bonuses, to get your actual DPS against a Tyranitar. So you can see how effective it can be. Right? So before we wrap this up and kind of show some more gameplay footage, there's one more Pokemon that I want to discuss that is kind of a sleeper counter to Tyranitar. You never really see this Pokemon used, but it is very, very good, especially if you don't have access to very good Vaporeon or a very good Machamp, and that is Poliwrath. So you can see here, Poliwrath is a fighting and water type Pokemon, and it resists all of Tyranitar's moves. So it's going to take 0.714 times damage against anything Tyranitar is going to use against it, because it is a hybrid of Machamp and Vaporeon basically, right? It's a fighting and water type Pokemon. So steel type moves, dark type moves, fire type moves, rock type moves, it doesn't matter. It's going to do less damage to the Poliwrath. Now, of course, Poliwrath being a water and a fighting type Pokemon, it has some decent base stats, around 180 average, which is not too bad, not too spectacular. It can definitely hold its own, and it's worth powering up if you have access to one, in my personal opinion. But what really makes Poliwrath shine is the fact that when you look at its movesets, you can see here that it has access to basically the best of both worlds. You have Bubble and Rock Smash, and you have Hydro Pump and Dynamic Punch. So basically, if you can get Rock Smash, which is a fighting type move, and Dynamic Punch, which is another fighting type move, as your charge move or your quick move and your charge move respectively, you're golden. Against the Tyranitar, you will take less damage overall, no matter what the Tyranitar has, and you will be dishing out super effective damage, right? Over that 2 times effective damage against the Tyranitar, because you have access to those fighting type moves. You benefit from stab, and you're just wrecking house. Of course, you can use TMs and stuff, but if you have a Bubble and a Hydro Pump, or a Rock Smash Hydro Pump, or a Bubble Dynamic Punch, anything is going to be useful with this Poliwrath against a Tyranitar. So, in my opinion, Poliwrath is a sleeper supreme counter against Tyranitar as well. So if you have one, don't be afraid to put it into your starting lineup, make it one of your first Pokemon that you use against a Tyranitar, along with any other Machamps and Vaporeons that you have. Now, that being said, of course, you know, if you don't have access to any of these Pokemon, basically the type effectiveness does play a huge role. So if you have access to other fighting type Pokemon that you can level up, or other water type Pokemon that you can level up, it's a good idea to use those first and foremost in your raid battle, because those will generate the most DPS and contribute the most to your team. And this is where team size does matter against a Tyranitar. I'm sure many of you have seen the video where 2 high-level Japanese players using maxed out Machamps, 6 Machamps each, took down a Tyranitar just by themselves, 2 players. So it is doable with just 2 players, but what are the odds that you're going to really have access to that? Probably not too high. In my experience, you can take down a Tyranitar with as little as 4 people that are above level 30 and have access to these kinds of decent Pokemon to use against it. If you don't have access to the ideal Pokemon, you're probably going to want a higher level party, you know, probably 25 and up, level 25 and up, at least 6 people, and as long as some of you guys have some decent counters, you should be able to get through the Tyranitar. Now, that being said, the battle plan when you go into that fight should essentially be just attack, because Tyranitar, it deals a lot of damage, but it's also very weak to those things that we outlined earlier. So you don't want to bypass the chance to deal as much damage as you can, utilizing the type effectiveness to your advantage, because you are against the clock in a Tyranitar battle, and if the less people you have, the more time strapped you're going to be, and you just need to deal the damage. So that is the best battle plan. If you have more players in your party, obviously the time restraint becomes a lot less, and you can kind of focus a little bit more on dodging and stuff if you want. But in a smaller party, you definitely only want to be dodging charge moves if you can, but any quick move that the Tyranitar is doing, just tank through them, use the type effectiveness to your advantage, and you should be able to come out on top if you have a party of 6 or more people. So that pretty much wraps up the video, guys. Let me know what you think. Hopefully this was enjoyable for many of you, and I'm sorry if I rambled on for too long of a period, but hopefully it was educational. If you do like the video, please drop a like on it, make a comment on some feedback if you think I can improve some things or not, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these specific raid in-depth analysis videos. It's a lot of basic information, but it's a lot of information that I find people don't seem to know, so I figured I'd just make a video about it. Hopefully it'll help some people and improve their effectiveness in these raid battles. But anyways, guys, that is it for my video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm out.